everyone. Welcome to our spring edition of Humanities Heroes at True North Academy. It's that time of year. People are shopping for classes. Everyone's searching for that perfect match for their students. And we want to make sure that you know about our amazing humanities classes at True North. I'm Beth Purcell. I'm an English and writing instructor at True North, as well as the humanities department lead. And I'm here with an amazing, awesome True North teacher, the amazing Anna Knaub. Hello, Anna. I am so thrilled to spend the next few minutes with Anna. She teaches some exciting and very important classes for True North that we want to talk about. But first, Anna, let me just ask you a couple of things. Tell us about yourself. Your
Yeah. Oh my
educational
goodness.
background, your teaching experience. How did you get into English Lit?
Yeah. So, I went to public school. I grew up here in Pennsylvania, and I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but I wasn't quite sure what. And so, like one year, I took music theory. I've sung and done all the musicals and things. Very quickly realized music theory was not my jam, and so, being a music teacher was not on the docket there. Um, And I was very fortunate that our high school also offered a full year Shakespeare, like English elective, and then British literature also happened to be kind of like the thematic English for the year as well. And so my senior year of high school, I was taking Shakespeare and British literature, and I was like, this is it. Like I am obsessed. And so I have my degree in secondary English education from the University of Valley Forge. I am a fully licensed and practicing Pennsylvania English teacher, and I have taught everything from life skills and lower level classes all the way up through AP. I also did a school year at CCA, which is an online public school here as well. Um, so that's kind of like all of my public kind of school information there. And when I was in college, I worked retail with this crazy lady named Melissa Grande, and she was homeschooling. And she was so wonderful. And I also thought she was crazy. And here we are, almost 20 years later. We are still best friends. And now I'm homeschooling too. And I'm on all that crunchy train with her. And I got a call from this random lady in South Dakota 5 years ago now, almost,
Oh,
that said, "Hey, um, your friend Melissa Grande teaches for me, and she said you're really awesome, and we're looking for some teachers. We're growing with COVID and everything.
yeah.
What do you think?" And at the time, I had two tiny humans, and I was going to be able to get to teach and work from home, and I thought, this is awesome. And now poor Lisa can't get rid of me, and I'm here for all eternity. And I actually started at True North teaching history classes, which is my other love.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been teaching English now for True North for this will be my fourth or fifth year. I don't know. They all run together. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into teaching and how I got into homeschooling, and because I'm homeschooling my own kids now, and I've been with True North the last few years. So that's how that happened.
That's amazing. What a great story, Anna. What a great story. And you've been at True North for 5 years? About
Yeah,
5 years?
I think this will be my fifth school year. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. Great. And you're in the Pennsylvania area. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes. I am in Lancaster with the cows and the Amish and the chocolate, and it's great. Yeah.
So let me ask you, Anna, why is literature so important for our students to study? You're all in British Lit and Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
is that an important subject for students?
Yeah. So I actually, one of the reasons that I really loved English was that it also gave me the opportunity to teach history. Um, Whereas if I just went history, you're kind of like pigeonholed in that. But it's very hard to teach literature of any kind without looking at historical context, without looking at what's happening in the author's life or just as a whole. And so we're really able to have such awesome conversations about, again, historical context. We're able to have really awesome conversations about psychology and sociology, even. We do a modest proposal in Brit Lit, and that is shocking and appalling to kids. But we talk a lot about the historical components of that, and the sociological things and how the English were treating the Irish.
Right.
And so it English is just so cool because it gives students a way to look at humanity
Yeah.
kind of outside of humanity,
Yes.
and look at it kind of from a third party and third person perspective, and be able to think critically, come
Yeah.
up with opinions and ideas and analyze things. And two students can read the same thing and analyze it differently,
Yeah.
and learn how to have those conversations. And so literature is just such a holistic thing to study because you're able to look at so many things outside of just the black and white words on the page.
Absolutely. It's about perspective and broadening that perspective for students, critical thinking, communication,
Mhm.
analyzing all those real world skills that they
Yeah,
need, right?
yeah,
Okay, so let's get to it then. Let's talk about some of your classes. You
yeah,
have three that are ready for students for the 25 fall semester.
yes,
You're teaching British literature and
yep,
composition.
yep,
You're teaching cinematic stories, which
yep,
is so exciting. And this one I just is just fascinating to me. Worlds Unraveled, which is
yeah,
a dystopian lit class,
yes,
right? Okay,
yes.
take us through these, Anna. What's so great about these three?
Yeah,
What's
absolutely.
your favorite
So,
thing?
I'll start with Britlit Survey. So, Britlit Survey is exactly what it sounds like. We start all the way at the beginning. I have it right here with Beowulf,
Yeah.
and the Anglo-Saxons, and we work our way through. We do some Canterbury Tales. We do some Shakespeare. We do Pride and Prejudice. We do a few little works. We do a few weeks on like the British Romanticism and Transcendentalism with poets because you just can't skip them. Um, we also, right now, we're in the midst of wrapping up Lord of the Flies, which the students are loving. We're having so much fun.
Wow.
Um, and they also get to pick a classic of their choice that I help guide them through: Frankenstein, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Heart of Darkness, or Tess of the Dubervilles.
Yeah.
And so students really get, it's so hard
Yeah.
when you have so much history, right? And
Yeah.
there's so much literature between 600 AD to now to like
Yes.
kind of pick it out. And so this is a really great opportunity for students to get a breadth of overview. You see the transition of English
Yeah.
through the years. You get the Regency and the Victorian and the Anglo-Saxon and the early modern with Shakespeare and the modern with Lord of the Flies. And so it's just a really nice, like, core kind of English class. You know that like if you send your kids to college and they have to take a British literature or something, they're not going in blind.
Yes.
Like your kids are getting those standard basic classics like the Canterbury and the Pride and Prejudice, even for the boys. And uh, each semester they do a presentation, they have an essay. I have them do a creative assignment. They just did Pemberley real estate listings, actually, for their Pride and Prejudice assignment, which was super fun. Uh,
Yeah.
and they are working on really neat interactive maps for Lord of the Flies. I cannot wait to like post those and share those with everybody. So yeah, it is kind of what you think of your standard kind of typical Britlit survey. But it's my jam. My concentration was medieval and Renaissance literature. And so I try to make it fun. And we have a lot of fun with that. So that's Britlit.
So, Anna, let me ask you, what does the survey piece mean? Because some people may
Survey.
what is British Lit survey? What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, so survey is when you are looking kind of at the whole, you're looking at the general. I did a really funny reel where, there's like survey, like when you're measuring things, surveying land
Yes.
versus the noun, where like you're overviewing and surveying things. And so, again, it's so hard when you have so much good literature. And like I could literally spend a year on like Anglo-Saxon literature. I could spend a year on it. Like I could really break it down here. But we are surveying the overview
Good.
type of survey,
Yeah,
which is why we have, like I said, we go Anglo-Saxon to modern. So you get a little bit of all of the pieces,
that's great.
and try and fill in all of those holes.
Perfect. That's great. That's great. All right. Tell us about cinematic stories.
Yeah. So Cinematic Stories is a newer class, and it is listed for kind of middle school age. I think it's really perfect for like seventh, eighth, kind of ninth grade range there. And basically, we are going to be, or students are going to be watching movies, and we are going to be looking at story components within movies. So
Mm.
really great classics. Remember the Titans, Holes, Princess Bride.
Yeah.
We've got some fun ones in there. And so students are going to be watching those movies. We're going to be having class discussions about, plot points.
Yeah.
When we're talking about stories, whether they're full novels or short stories, we're looking at exposition, characterization, rising actions, climax, falling actions, resolutions. And a lot of people or students don't necessarily realize that that's exactly how movies are. That is what a movie is. And
Yes.
so
With a little bit of conflict thrown in there,
a little
right?
bit of gotta have the five different types of conflict and everything in there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we'll be breaking down movies, looking at those things, talking about themes and symbolism and everything that we would really kind of talk about and learn
Mhm.
reading a story. We're going to be talking about and learning just from a cinematic perspective.
So what a great marriage, if you will, between
Yeah,
classic lit,
yeah,
because a lot of these are classical literature
yeah,
pieces that's been turned into film, and
yes,
then kind of comparing those. And as you said, it's so interesting to me because film follows that exact plot that
yeah.
we used to call it plot mountain, right? The
Yes, yes. I
whole
have kids do them still. Totally. Yep.
yeah, the whole scenario that you would find in a novel, they're exactly here in film, and all those literary elements are
Yeah.
part of that too. What a great way. Now, so viewing stories, will you be also reading novels that to go with those, or will you be referencing novels that go with those? How will that
Yep.
work?
Yep. So a little bit of both. So just because of the pacing of it and the weeks and reading abilities and kind of age ranges and stuff, what we'll be doing is students will be able to pick one of the movies that's also been turned into a book,
Hmm.
and they will be reading that book of their choice,
Yes.
and they will be doing assignments and responding to it in that way. So they'll have a selection of like, out of these movies that we're watching this semester, these are the ones that are books. Pick
Right.
one, and then we're going to do things with it. So there's going to be components with that. I've obviously read pretty much all of the books already myself, and
Yeah.
so I'll be able to pull in things like that. We'll be reading certain excerpts, especially for specific scenes,
Yeah.
just because, in a book, you often get that inner monologue and
Right.
that like inner dialogue and inner thoughts.
Right.
Whereas when you're watching it on a movie, it's a blank face,
That's
right?
right.
And so it's definitely important to incorporate, like, hey, by the way, in the book,
Yeah.
this is what that character's thinking.
Yeah.
Um, and even analyzing, how directors and script writers try and incorporate that. It's very interesting. Some of them will brush by things.
Yeah.
Which points do they think are important? Sometimes they will have a character mumble something out loud,
Yeah.
that is said internally in the book
Yeah.
because it's just that important. And so even looking at some of that nuanced, I guess really like those film components,
Right.
looking at some of that production stuff,
Yeah.
makes a difference as well. And again, a fun twist to learning about the literature, from kind of that film standpoint. So even students who are interested in film,
Yeah.
if they're doing like the video editing class or the audio editing class,
Yeah.
this is a really fun class to pair with either of those classes,
Yeah.
because we're looking at the actual storytelling component of making videos and movies.
That's exactly right. I mean, every movie started with a script. Every
Yep.
movie started with either a novel to base on the
Yeah.
script, but every movie has a script. So really looking at that and having our filmmakers aware, you can't really
Yeah.
get by without knowing what the literary components are.
Yeah.
And you've got a broad, long list too
Yeah.
of movies that students will be studying. So,
Yeah.
what a great class. That's an exciting one. And I love the fact that you're bringing in a few of those novel components because you're right. Directors are our interpreters
Mm,
for the novel or the script. And
yeah.
so often it's different. And I love that you're going to be hitting that. All right, Anna, tell us about Worlds Unraveled.
Yeah, so Worlds Unraveled is my regular dystopian lit and comp class. This is the longest running class that I've actually had with True North. It consistently fills fairly well. And what we do is in the fall, we read Brave New World and 1984. They are kind of like two of the OG standard dystopian and post-apocalyptic books is kind of what I like to say.
Yeah.
And we read the whole novels. We read them together. And they also do a society project. So I usually split the class up into 2 or 3 groups,
Okay.
and they end up creating their own dystopian or post-apocalyptic societies, which is always so much fun. But we do a lot of really in-depth character analysis.
Mhm.
Something that I think is really easy to miss in dystopian lit is the character analysis because we're looking at the themes, we're looking at the plots, which is so true. Like
Yes.
it, dystopian is the theme, you
Yeah.
know? But especially Orwell and oh my goodness, George Orwell and who wrote the other book? I'm looking at it right now. Huxley. Huxley. I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't
Oh,
remember.
Alex, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, we're masters
Hmm?
at creating characters and
Yeah.
creating foil characters. So characters that are opposites of each other, characters that are very intentionally different, as well as characters that are intentionally very, very similar with 1 or 2 nuanced differences.
Right.
And so we spent a lot of time looking at that. This class is fairly heavy in literary criticism. And I know Lisa and I have talked about this in previous ones. It's the slowing down and acknowledging your thoughts is really
Yeah.
what literary criticism often is,
Mhm.
especially in something in Brave New World where like they encourage open like partnerships kind of thing. And you might stop and think, well, that's not like ethically, morally correct. Like that goes against biblical principles. And it's
Right.
like, yes, that is moral philosophical literary criticism. You do it and you don't even realize it. And so we spend that time kind of, I often say, learning how to read for more than just pleasure.
Yeah.
Um, this class is great for like 10th and 11th and even 12th graders.
Mhm.
You're reading for more than plot point.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
at this point, you should be able to tell me this is how the book starts, this is what happens in the middle, and this is how it ends. Okay,
Right.
now we're asking some of the deeper questions. And
Yeah.
so we do that in the fall. And that builds us all up for the spring. We spend the first month of the spring semester doing an identity unit.
Okay.
And so we talk about what makes us us from ethnicity to race to where we live and our dialect and what we eat and how we talk. And all of these fun things, our last names,
Yeah.
do you know where your family came from?
Yeah.
And kind of what makes us us,
Yeah.
because often in dystopian and apocalyptic literature, one of the ways that government controls its people is by removing identity.
Yeah. There's conformity, right?
And yes,
Mhm.
and that's one of the issues that characters have in Brave New World in 1984 is the conditioning doesn't quite overcome
Mhm.
that identity removal. And so it's important for them to understand identity because we then spend the next 12 weeks of class writing their own dystopian and apocalyptic stories.
Oh, wow.
Um, I say it every year. Oh my gosh, every class, multiple times a class. I'm like, I'm just so excited. This is so fun. We spend the first few weeks doing back planning. And so we do characterization, we do setting, they do outlining and plot pointing, their rising actions and climax and falling action.
Yeah.
We do a week where we talk about good versus evil versus conflict and what those all look like,
Mhm.
so that by the time they actually sit down and write,
Yeah.
they have a plan, they have a direction,
Right.
and they're not sitting there looking at a blank page going, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Because they have it.
They have it.
Um, and now we're at that point of the semester where every class, they're breaking up into small groups or partners, and sometimes we do whole work stuff.
Yeah.
And I'll say, okay, the first week we read everybody's intro paragraph.
Wow.
And we were like, what questions do you have? What do you know about like the main character? Like,
Yeah.
what are some predictions that you have? And it's just really neat because by the end of it, everybody kind of has a little bit of ownership in
Mhm.
each other's pieces because they've all helped each other out and given feedback. And um, I actually bundle them all up. They also create like book covers for their stories.
Ah,
And we create a class book that is then available on the website for people to download. And so at the end of it, they end up with this incredible. Most kids, I have to tell them to cut pages. They're like, they hit 20 pages and they're like, but I'm not done. And I'm like, but I have to grade 15 of you and they're each 30 pages. And
I was
so,
going
yeah,
to
it's
ask
a
you, I was going to ask you if students struggle with that part of the class in the spring semester,
no.
but it doesn't sound like it.
No, because we do such a thorough job
Mhm.
back planning
Yeah.
and because it's a full semester process,
Right.
really.
Right.
Um, they
Well,
get
and
into it.
they've had good examples in the fall semester to
Right.
learn from and model after.
Right. And then they talk to each other in class and they give each other ideas like, oh, you could do this and you could do this. And then they're, oh, yeah. And so I get on every week. I have them upload drafts so I can make sure that they're actively working on it. And it's so fun. Like you'll have a student who maybe does like 2 or 3 pages for like a few weeks. And then all of a sudden you can tell that they got in a jam and there's like 10 pages. And you're like, all right, this is how it's going. And so it's just such a cool class because again, in the fall, we do that reading, we do that analysis, we really do that kind of story breakdown that we were talking about, even in like cinematic stories, we
Yeah.
do that in the fall. And then they take all of this stuff that they learned in the fall and we apply it in the spring. And I always tell them, I'm like, I'm telling you, once you get to the spring, it's going to make sense. Once you get to the spring, it's going to make sense. And I had a student 2 years ago. It's still like one of my favorite things. He also is a writer, loves to write, and he was really begrudging like the writing process
Yeah.
with me. And like, I'm like, trust me, trust me,
Yeah.
trust me. And by the end, he's like, I'm not gonna lie, I thought you were crazy. I did not love this. And now I get it. And it's like my favorite class. But it took him
Yeah.
like actually going through it to be like, I understand you're kind of crazy now. Like
Yeah.
this does track. It does make sense.
The process made sense to him after, didn't it?
Yes, yes. And so yeah, it's been a really fun class every year. I think the students get a lot of I get a lot out of it every year, honestly. Every year, I end up crying at least once, especially when we, talk about the identity unit and everything. And just to give the teenagers that encouragement too. Um, about, why we were made and what we were made for and how they can incorporate kind of that beauty and that light in their writing. That is kind of one of my rules. I'm like, dystopian is naturally dark
Yeah.
as kind of what it is.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's always great about it is that there is hope.
Mhm.
And so we are always writing with the intention of hope and kind of goodness. And like, yeah, there is going to be loss and there again, there's always going to be darkness. That's the reality of the world.
That's right.
But there's also always victory. And so they always just do such an incredible and mature job
Yeah.
with it too.
Yeah.
It's very easy for especially teenagers,
Yes.
teenagers,
Sure.
to not want to be mature about it, not want to take it seriously. And I've never had an issue with students like going sideways, basically, which thank you. Um, but yeah, it's great. And like I said, it's been my longest running class, and it's been a really great I guess technically elective. You could count it technically as a Brit Lit because 1984 and Brave New World are both British.
Right.
But it's been a really solid lit and comp class the last few years. So I always love teaching it for sure.
Wonderful information about that class. How exciting. And I love that component in the spring where they really get to put their writing skills to work, test their
Yeah.
writing chops and creative abilities.
Yeah.
Anna, this class, Worlds Unraveled, you said was pretty appropriate for, what'd you say, 10th through 12th?
Yeah, I've had students as young as eighth grade. I had a parent that I had communicated back and forth with.
Great.
She felt really comfortable with the content of 1984 and Brave New
Yeah.
World. 1984 and Brave New World do
Yeah.
both have kind of some more mature themes.
Right.
They are all taught from a Christian worldview and point of view. Like, hey, this is the decision they're making. Obviously, like this is not the choice that we make, but
Right.
they're struggling because they're living like this. Like
Yes.
they're having issues because there is no religion, there is no God, and
Right.
they're living outside of those bounds. And so
Right.
this is what they have.
Yeah.
And
And this is
so,
what they're missing.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I've had students as young as eighth grade do it. I
Okay.
would say 10th grade is probably my average.
Okay.
I very regular 10th and 11th grade for sure.
10th.
Are definitely my average. I always have like one or two 12th graders. I always have like one or two ninth graders. But I would say the bulk of students are usually in that 10th and 11th grade range.
Okay.
And it's usually spot on for them as far as reading level, as far as writing ability.
Right.
Um, and they've had enough English in their prior years to understand, a lot of things like themes and the story mountains and stuff.
Right.
That seems to kind of be the sweet spot. Yeah.
Okay. And then, and that is found under the high school tab in
Yeah.
our website, and the link to that class is in comments.
Yeah.
Cinematic Stories is found under the junior high tab, but you said it's also appropriate for high school. Seven,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yep. So, all of the movies I believe are G or PG. They're pretty much all available. I believe it says on the description on like Disney Plus. Um, I again, up to parent discretion. I
yeah,
don't think again, they're all rated. Remember the Titans has some maybe not mature themes, but obviously talking about race. And so again, as long as parents read the descriptions, they're
right,
aware, preview the movies yourself before you make a
right,
commitment. Everything is there on the website. I'm not going to be pulling out like random books or random movies that haven't been
yes,
anything. So I try not to change things too much. And if there is, there's always communication. I've not ever had that problem. So parents can always go in with eyes wide open as far as that goes.
and then British Lit's also found in the high school tab, and that
Yes.
is 9th through 12th.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep. So I think honestly, what often ends up happening is students probably end up taking your world lit like ninth grade,
mhm,
and they probably take Miss Jinx's American lit like in 10th grade. And then at least in Pennsylvania, that's kind of the normal pattern.
right,
Um, Brit lit tends to be like an 11th, 12th grade kind of option. But the reading the Lexile number, if you will, the reading spans across anything from ninth to 12th grade. It's fine. And I walk students through everything. There are very thorough study guides that go along with our readings. I have my Lord of the Flies ones here, actually. And we go over those. And so your student is never left like, here, just read this. Like there is always conversation and going over things. So I always say my job is to challenge your students to learn, not challenge them to fail. Um,
Right.
and so things may be sometimes a little lower than their reading level, sometimes maybe a little higher. But I walk them through every step of the way, either way, so that they can be successful. And so far, my classes are pretty much unfailable as long
Yeah.
as you show up. As long as you show up and do your work and do your reading, that's pretty much how that floats. So yeah,
And if
ninth
you
through
show
12th
up and you
grade.
do the work and you do the reading, you're going to be a well-rounded
Yes,
student and you're going to
yes,
have a great time.
exactly,
And
exactly.
I
It's
love
crazy, I know.
I love the fact that you really work to build collaboration and
Yeah,
community within your
yeah,
students because some people often ask, well, this is an online class. How can my student feel involved and engaged? And it sounds
yeah.
like you've got a lot of great opportunities for collaboration and building your class community. I love
Yeah, we do lots of little fun things when we do Canterbury Tales.
it.
I have them for one of the tales. I put them into little breakout rooms and they create memes
Yeah.
based on one of the tales. One of them we did almost like a retelling, and I read them the Three Little Pigs from the wolf's perspective. And I said, okay, now you're going to retell the Canterbury Tale kind of a la Three Little Pigs from the wolf's perspective, from this character's perspective. And like I have them do little assignments like that in class, and it always ends up fun. And then, as I said, with dystopian lit, especially with the writing, um, and even Brit Lit, when we have essays, we usually have edit days where I have them swap with peers and they get to do peer editing. So it's not just them or their parents looking at things and they get that practice in. So, yes, there is definitely a lot of opportunity for students to not just be doing whole class discussion, but be connecting with each other and doing those fun projects and assignments too.
Anna, what an amazing year ahead. The 25-26 school year registration is open for
Yes.
Anna's classes. Be sure and check them out. Again, links to her classes are in the comment box. Anna, you are truly a gift to True North. So thank you so much for what you do for our students. Again, be sure to enroll today. Anna, any parting thoughts?
Oh goodness, I don't think so. I do know that if Brit fills up, we will be opening a second section. Same thing with the dystopian lit as well, especially those two high school classes. They do tend to sell well, and so get your seats so that we know if we need to open up a second section or not. But I think that's maybe it. Yeah, I'm excited as always. Everything is exciting for me, so it's fine.
All right, guys, you do not want to miss this. Learn from the best, Miss Anna Knaub at True North Academy. Thank you, Anna, for your time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. I hope to see you again soon for another episode of True North Humanities Heroes. Have a great day.
Bye.